Yeah, so I am Kate Robertson. I am the CEO of the Sir Ken Robinson Foundation, which is launching in March of this year, which is very exciting. And we are establishing ourselves to continue the work of my father, Sir Ken Robinson, particularly beginning with organising his archive, which we've spent the past 12 months doing, and establishing a Sir Ken Robinson pedagogy that we'll be able to take into schools.
Perfect. So you've had a little bit of a moment to let Peggy's poem sit. I just wanted to let you just reflect a little bit on that. I know it's a tall order, but tell us a bit about kind of what that brought to mind for you in this space.
Many things, and I had the pleasure of reading the poem beforehand, thank you. And was very struck with it before, but there's nothing quite like watching the performance of it. That was just, I mean, the words pop very differently when you see them formed in such a human way, and I think that, for me, is one of the key reflections here, is we're talking about legacy, which is something I talk a lot about, and leadership and limitation, and I think realising how much of everything that we do, everybody in this room, is about humans. It's about the system that we're working to change as a human system. And I think bringing more of that human passion into the conversation is such an incredible step forward, particularly for us to do, and to start the day with it, which is incredible. But I have a favourite line, if I may, which was at the end about how their future is in our hands, but our future is in their hands. And we forget that. I think, we get to a certain point, because I think maybe we've believed the story that you go to school and you graduate and you get a job and you become in charge. That even, us here working to change the system are, omnipotent in some capacity, that we have direct control over what happens in these children's lives, and we forget that they are living their lives, and cosmically, karmically, then we'll go on to control what happens to us later in life. Yeah,
I think that's such a powerful line, and I was thinking a bit about, because I do a lot of kind of youth work outside this job and with the Scouts and things, in the times when I'm most kind of inspired and excited about the future are when I hear young people's ideas about things and you're like, oh, it's going to be fine. It's going to be absolutely fine. So yeah, I think that's really good. But also there's a slightly menacing element to that line, I thought, as well. It's like, yeah you better get it right in this room, because yeah, exactly, they're running the cows. Just kind of take that away from it as well. So obviously one of your dad's kind of key kind of ways of introducing things was helping us to imagine if. So I wanted to just kind of invite you to just help us think about the big picture, and some of the things, we've talked about how over this series of conferences we've gone in a way from the big picture down to, I think, a really good opportunity today to think about some of the nuts and bolts. But take us just back up into the stratosphere for a moment and just help us think about, like, if we get this right, if we change this system, what would you like to kind of imagine would change?
Okay. Great, start small. Thank you. Small and easy. Yeah, the reason Imagine If was such a thing for Dad and for us in the work that we do, the reason the book is called Imagine If, is because imagination is fundamentally what separates us from the rest of life on Earth, and there isn't much else that does. We make a big deal of the bits that do, but we depend on the Earth, like every other creature, to live and survive and to flourish. We survive in a very small set of conditions, temperatures, as we're learning, certainly at the start of this year. But imagination is what has led us from caves to cities. It's what's taken us to where we are. It's been the driving force. Every leap of human progression has come from somebody somewhere saying something along the lines of imagine if. And through that, we've developed these systems that we take for granted, including our education system. And again, we forget that it's a human system. We forget that it was designed by people, for people. This idea of limitation and self-talk that Pedro talked about is so important, particularly I think here in the UK, because there is a very negative, well, nothing will change. And it's hard earned. I don't think we wake up, but if you've been fighting this fight for a long time, it is very difficult to make change happen, and it is very easy to fall into the mindset that it never will. But I urge you to fight it, to keep realizing that human-made systems can change more than say mountains can, because they are designed by people, for people. So if we could imagine if, and we could imagine if the education system was different, it's not groundbreaking, although the development of it is. I think first and foremost it has to be for the individual. It was designed as it is for the masses. We know that. But if we're going to face the future head on and the present head on, we have to have a system that's designed for the individual first and foremost, with embedding in them then a recognition that they are part of a wider whole.
I love that. And I feel like imagination is one of those things where it can be easy to fall into a trap of thinking like either you're born imaginative or you're not. It's one that you don't. There's no school subject imagination. So when do you kind of learn it? So I guess one of the things I was just taking for what you were saying was we also need to think about imagination and creativity as something that we need to be fostering in the system, rather than something that either you've got or you haven't.
Or you haven't, massively. And one of the things that blew my mind as well is that imagination, we're all born with different capacities for imagination, which you kind of think of imagination as being like red, it's or blue, it's the same, whoever's looking at it. I don't know if that's scientifically true. Is it actually? It's the same. I said that so confidently. But imagination isn't, and so there are people who have a very strong musical imagination, can bring to mind whole scores of music, but struggle to imagine images. There are people who can't bring images to mind at all, with a condition called aphantasia, with they call it blind mind's eye. But nevertheless, we all have capacity to imagine a situation that is different. And certainly, there are these myths surrounding creativity, one of which is that you either have it or you don't. Which is very old-fashioned. We know so much more about the brain now and about creativity as a muscle, and that the more you use it, it was Maya Angelou who said you can't run out of it, the more you use it, the more you get. And certainly in schools it's a perfect opportunity to implement strategies and programs that encourage that.
I love that, it's really important. So I was serious when I said I wanted to make this interactive, so I'm going to come out to the audience now, so I'm giving my microphone colleagues a chance. And I'm going to give you a special permission, because you come to these conferences, and when you ask a question, you have to pretend that you've got a question at the end of it. So you don't have to. I just want to take a couple of reactions to Pedgi's poem and to what Kate has just been saying. You can make it a question if you want, but a reaction, a thought, a feeling is absolutely fine as well. Who'd like to start us off? Don't be shy. Perfect. One in the front row. Susan's going to just come and join you. Do say who you are so that we can get to know each other in the room as well.
Deborah Davidson, working for Comino Foundation. I just want to say that it's the first time I've been to a conference on assessment that has been co-opened by a poet. What a sign of things to come, I hope.
Oh, well, we love that kind of reaction. Great.
Yeah.
Great job, Pedgi. Any other reactions to the poem or to Kate's kind of first thoughts? Yeah, right at the back. I'm sorry. I haven't set this up just to make you run up the stairs. I'm so sorry, Susan. Meanwhile, Sarah's got an easy job on that side. People can think of your questions over that side.
I just thought it was really interesting that what you were saying about imagination, and the more you use it, the more it builds. We only yesterday were having a conversation about how some children, I work in primary, and some children have amazing imagination, and some are really stunted, and you can tell those that have limited use of technology and games, and those that are allowed to play, and those that have dolls and cars and dinosaurs. There's a huge difference already in nursery. That can be seen for the children who really struggle, and that takes a lot of effort throughout school, because also their opportunities are limited quite often as well.
Yeah. Really important. Just say who you are as well, just so we know we can meet people in the room.
I'm Stephanie from a primary school in Oldham.
Lovely, nice to meet you. And talking of play, just to plug something else we've done recently, we did a really good session with Kath, who's in the room, and the Steiner School in Hereford, talking about the way that Steiner Waldorf education integrates play, which I think is another really good model. We'll grab one more thought, and then we're going to come back to you, Kate, just here in the middle, and Sora is on her way. Thank you, Sora, giving you some exercise now.
Hi, I'm Chris, head teacher at the Silk School, and I just found obviously the comment about limitation in the poem of Pedgi, and what you're saying yourself, Kate, about imagination and concern about what drives limitations. So sometimes I think about imagination, yes, it's a powerful tool to shape humanity, we want to cultivate that. But I question how we fight those limitations around the fear of parents who have this kind of focus on academic outcomes, the imagination as a soft skill or an irrelevant skill, not understanding the perspective your father's presented and studies and advocate the line of his philosophy as well.
Yeah.
But also about imagination being monetized. When we talk about universities where there needs so much ideas being spun out and venture capitalism comes in. And a part of me wonders what your thoughts are maybe on that, of imagination maybe being used or misused for economic reasons or for other reasons rather than for the purpose of pushing humanity forward for a better outcome. And they're things that we want to cultivate, but how do you drive that narrative and how do you shift it? So.
Amazing. And just say, oh yeah, that's perfect. That's absolutely great. So I'm going to come back to a couple of those issues with you, Kate, and then we'll come back out for another round as well. So the first one to come back on, Kate, was just kind of this whole area of creativity, really. Yeah. So we talk about creativity. Often people slip into the dialogue of that means kind of creative subjects, but I know that you feel like it's much more than that. So just say a little bit about kind of imagination linked to creativity and how we can kind of embed that.
Okay. First, though, can I just I've got 3 kids, and having now school-age kids has been such a mind-opening experience for just how vocal and sort of stuck in their ways parents are when it comes to it. And I was saying this earlier, I think it's a case of better the devil you know with parents, that they went through a system and they're more comfortable with their kids going through something that's familiar. But it's a massive one that needs addressing, is getting parents to understand why it's so important that these changes happen. And it doesn't matter how traumatized they've been by their own school experience either, interestingly. It's a very odd concept. You asked a question.
I did. Creativity, creative subjects, and how that links to imagination.
Yes, thank you. Well, so we define creativity based off a report that Dad did in 1999, which I'm sure some of you will know. I know, Bill, you definitely will, called All Our Futures, where the committee put together the definition that creativity is the process of having original ideas that have value. And the 3 key words they picked there were process, and that's one that people misunderstand a lot. They think that they're either creative or not. An idea is perfect, like immediately, or it's not. So process, whereas you have to, it's iterative as a process. Original, so it doesn't have to be original in the grand scheme of humanity, but just the person going through the process. And then value is the one people always get a bit hung up on about, but the way I interpret it is that it's about what the goal is of going through the process in the first place, and so you define value when you set out on the journey yourself. You can apply that to everything, and you should, in the same way that academics is a way of looking at things too. You can be academic about dance, or about art. You can be creative and highly creative when it comes to mathematics. It's, if you speak to somebody who's truly passionate about mathematics, they'll refer to how beautiful it is and how it's a profoundly creative subject. It's also then when you're talking to, say, parents or schools about it, some of the ways, there's the utopia idea that everyone will just love creativity, imagination, and we'll all dance off into the sunset. And then there's the realistic way that you have to sort of speak the language to get it understood. And part of that is that some of the things that parents and the mainstream system of education wants to see are actually very useful in developing creativity and imagination. Things like critical thinking and problem solving are key. People think that creativity is swinging from the rafters with no rules, but actually boundaries are an incredible way to harness creativity. You can't have one without the other. It's something Dad wrote. He said that creativity and imagination and intelligence are blood relatives. They don't exist without each other. They're faculties of being human.
Nice, I love that. And I think that speaks as well to a question that came up in the earlier session, just about kind of, are we still thinking too much in terms of siloed subjects? Yeah. That's something that we definitely would agree from kind of the Edge perspective, whether we look at kind of things like the International Baccalaureate or kind of interdisciplinary learning or some of the projects. But I was listening to Jeff Barton recently talking about the Oracy Commission, and he was making the point that actually of all the people he spoke to, it was maths teachers and maths departments that were the most excited about Oracy. Yeah. I think that speaks to exactly the same point that you've just mentioned, that maths can be beautiful, maths can be imaginative, science can be creative. There's not really, those boundaries don't exist anywhere apart from in school. As adults, we're using our creative brains and our mathematical brains and everything kind of together, and we can get very hung up on those kind of boundaries.
Yeah, I spoke to somebody who runs the Maths Museum, which I think is in Leeds. And this may not be groundbreaking to you guys, but it was to me that the way we teach maths in school is like if we were teaching football and all we did was drills and you never got to play a game. You never then get to see what the sums are for in a real world setting. Yeah. Which is beautiful, if you do it right.
Yeah, beautiful and also practical. Like maths is a great example of one where financial planning later in life can come in really handy. So it's like, exactly, a lot of people say that. And I just wanted to pick up that point you made about parents as well, because I think that applies to policymakers too. That's the kind of universe that I came from originally. But I think we've seen a lot of successive ministers, secretaries of state coming through. And my personal belief is, that having worked with a lot of them, they're all trying to do their best. but they often fall into the trap of trying to remake the system as the system that they went through. So if only everyone got a 1970s grammar school education, everyone could be like me, which is not the dream, not quite what we want to get there. So I think that kind of point about parents can be like writ large with politicians as well.
Also, the average, in the last government, the average education minister sat in office for 400 days before swapping. What change are they going to make in that time?
To be fair, some of them we wanted to get rid of well before the 400 day.
None of them were devastating goodbyes, but in terms of actual creating change, you need somebody who understands it, who's not looking to the next step in their own career progression.
Completely agree. Let's come out again, get a couple more thoughts either on Pejji's poem or what we've been talking about. We've got 2 here, so keeping Sarah busy.
Hi, Alison Peacock from the Chartered College of Teaching. I loved the opening of this conference because it speaks to the art of the possible. And I think the profession represented here today has within its hands the possibility of making such a difference in terms of assessment that impacts all children's lives. So I just encourage us to continue in this spirit of creativity, art of the possible. Anything can happen. Thank you very much.
Love it. Great reflection. There was another one on this side. Yeah, gentleman there. And then we'll come to the back.
Hello, I've probably got to read this. John Greenwell from Fenny's College in Edinburgh. I'm one of the maths guys that's trying to teach skills.
Amazing.
Break it down into skills and using RSC as a way of talking about it. So anyone wants to see a grey-haired, bearded guy with a maroon top on coming out of a chat about maths. Well, yeah, there's so much opportunity now with just rigid structure of, you need to know this, therefore you'll do it, is just a horrendous system that we I don't know, people.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and I think that the more people I meet out there, the more people I see doing innovative things kind of in spite of the system. So I would love to just kind of do 2 things: keep encouraging everyone to do amazing things, like Alison's just said, but also just make those changes. They don't have to even be huge. Even quite small changes in the right direction could make things so much easier for you and all your colleagues who are trying to do the right thing. We've lady in the green top at the top, and then Susan, if you could come to the front, that'd be wonderful. Perfect.
Hello, Deborah Kidd from British School of Brussels. I was just really drawn to that phrase of education being about a human system and the human element of education and learning. When we had the session at the beginning of the day, although it's heartening to see examples embracing the opportunities of technology and thinking about individuality, the concern for me sometimes is the potential isolation of that for the students and the kind of increasing I suppose, lack of opportunity for young people to connect in emotional and effective ways in the classroom. So it's lovely to hear that human dimension. I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts about how that might impact on assessment, where oracy is valued, collaboration is valued, that collaborative problem solving, and that force for good in the world where we move forward taking ethical action. How can that be reflected in our assessment system?
Brilliant, thank you. We're going to take 2 more and then come back to you, Kate, and then we'll have time for another one. This lady here, and then gentleman there. Perfect.
Hi, I'm Katie Finlayson. I'm a home educator. One thing that's struck me so far is you're very much talking about the system as in schools, and there are already children who are outside of that system and still need to be included. So inclusivity is not only within schools, it's all of those children, including those ones who are already, for whatever varied reasons, outside of that. Assessment qualifications does tend to be the point where it all kind of comes together again at the end.
Great, thank you so much. One more and then we'll come back to you, Kate. Just the gentleman here, thank you.
Thank you. John Sibbald, educator in Manchester. You've just reminded me of one of the animations your dad was involved in, and I just encourage delegates to have a look at it. It's the RSA Animate, Changing Education Paradigms. It actually came out in 2010, way before the EBAC, and in that your dad talks about children being anaesthetised, their senses being shut off, deadening themselves to what's happening. And he talks about aesthetics and what that means is in terms of being in the moment and enjoying something and being alive. And I think it got me thinking, I haven't been watching it again actually, but it got me thinking about how can we wake young people up? How can we activate them in their learning? How can we develop agency in young people to take control of their learning? But it's really worth watching. RSA Animate, Changing Education Paradigms. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Great recommendation. So I want to come back to a couple of themes there. The kind of really important point around home education and the point around kind of technology, isolation, how we kind of get over that. So any reflections on those, Kate? And then we'll build from there.
There's a follow-up to the RSA Animate, by the way, which is done by the same studio called A Future for Us All, which was Dad's last public talk. The day he found out he was dying, he called Andrew Park from Cognitive Media, who did the RSA Animate, and asked him to animate his final talk, and that came out a couple of years ago. So watch that one and then watch the next one. I home educated my daughter for a year. We were in Windsor, and she was at a school that I thought was everything we wanted, and it turned out not to be. And then we found the beautiful school she's at now. But so I, having spent a year home educating, I have nothing to except for just so much respect and love for the whole home education world and movement. And if we hadn't found the school she's at now, we would have continued home educating forever and ever. So there are some. It's what's interesting about, not to get overly political about, the VAT that's come on the private schools, but so much of the innovation that's happening in education is happening in private settings because a lot of young people, it's not all sort of Vietonian places where 20% is nothing to families. It's a lot of families whose kids aren't able to home educate, but who've had to look outside the system, who are working 3 jobs just to be able to afford school fees, but where this innovation is really happening outside the system, and there's a lot to learn from it. So I totally agree.
Thank you, Kate. And this point around kind of technology, there is this risk of isolation. Obviously, all the research is showing young people a lot more on their phones, but is there an opportunity to kind of square that circle and have imagination and creativity and also technology? Yeah,
and there are so many sides to the debate. Dad used to share an image of a group of teenagers walking along looking at their phones, and it said social media underneath, because they weren't engaging with each other. Well, they probably were actually through. I think the thing with technology is it is out there. And I'm a big supporter of keeping kids off social media and things until they're 16 and that whole movement that's happening. But it is out there, and the phrase that they use in the AI world is bad actors. There will be bad actors out there who will use it for bad. But the really important thing with tools like ChatGPT or Claude or all the open source ones at the moment is that they're learning from us. And it's really important that there are more good voices than bad voices whilst it's learning. And I think a lot of people, their instinct is to say, I'm not going to touch it because it's bad. It's not, it's nothing. It will learn from us. So I would implore you that if you have reservations about AI, lean into it and get your voice out there so it learns from the good people, not just the bad actors. In theory, it should be the great equalizer for things like creativity and imagination, because people who maybe don't feel inclined to, or don't have a natural aptitude for things like drawing, for example, and don't feel like they have the time or capacity to develop that in themselves, could put in a creative prompt to an AI and have a work of art created that they could build off of. So it could, in theory, be the great equalizer. And yes, there will be, people who use it to write their essays and submit them to school, and to, write movie scripts and submit them to their job, and all sorts of things. But I hope, because it's out there and there's no reason, you have to hope, otherwise you won't get out of bed in the morning, that we as good sides of society will win out, and that it will be overpowering more good than it is bad, in the same way that the internet has proved to be, or that television has proved to be. And I think this is our generation's version of that. When my dad was growing up, his parents were shocked and horrified by the idea of television. My parents were shocked and horrified by the idea that I was on instant messenger. I'm shocked and horrified at the things that the kids are doing on TikTok. And I think my kids are just shocked and horrified at everything that we do, as is the cycle of parenthood in life. But in theory, it should be an equalizer. If we use it properly, there's Socratic ways to train AI so that it can help with teaching and supporting and assessment. And of course, there are ways that people can use it to say, AI did my job for me, so I can go to the pub earlier. You've just got to be active if you are in the former group.
Yeah. You can tell from the questions that there are a lot of fans of your dad's work in the room, me included, which is wonderful. And he continues to inspire our work. Just tell us a little bit more about the foundation and kind of what your plans are there.
With big plans. Thank you. When my dad passed away, our commitment to him was that we would continue his work, and we've done that through publishing the book, through the second animation. We have a creative community called the Creative Revolution, but the time has finally come, I think, to create a named foundation for him. We have the archive, as I said, which is 127 boxes, and what was in life a hoarding problem, in death has become a collection of international significance, which is wonderful. But it's everything from diaries as a kid right the way through to every talk note from every talk he ever gave. He came and put in shoeboxes and organised them by date. We have the TED Talk ones, we have the RSA Animate ones, we have all of them. We have we have everything. Imagine everything, that's what we have, all of it. And we spent the past year going through with an archivist, so we're actually looking to use AI to build something exciting about it, because his handwriting was appalling, but they can read hieroglyphics now that have been buried in lava for hundreds of years. So
there's hope for all of us.
20 years off Dad's handwriting. But it can say, take those talk notes and read all of it in one go, and then show us the arc and the progression of it. We're talking about creating an immersive archive that's open source to everybody, where you could go and have a conversation with the archive. We could be super creepy and make it act like him. We won't. I think that's where the ethics line comes in. Resurrection is probably the line in the sand for me on that one. But so that's the first one, and then the other thing we're using with it is to create a pedagogy, so a Robinson pedagogy like a Montessori or a Steiner, or a Reggio Emilia, where you could, your school or you as a practitioner could become a Robinson practitioner or a school. And so we could have this creative education in existing settings and new settings.
Brilliant. That is very exciting stuff. Yeah, and launching in spring this year?
March, yeah, Dad's 75th birthday.
Amazing. That'll be an incredibly, the right time to do it, exactly. Let's take just a couple more thoughts in the room, and then we're going to bring this session gently to a close, but it's been really rich. Gentleman in red and then in blue at the top. Sorrow's on your way. And was that just a stretch? No, a perfect one here as well.
Hello, I'm Nick MacDonald from the Rudolf Steiner School in Anfield in Stourbridge. I think your father's work was amazing. Linking it with an assessment conference is interesting. So I think he may have actually said this, so I might be quoting him here. But it's not about finding out how intelligent the child is, surely. It's about finding out how the child is intelligent. And it's a matter of, when we pigeonhole and silo things into these subjects, we create a problem. And I think that's a question this conference needs to answer, really, perhaps.
Massively.
Great.
Can I just pick this up?
Of course, yeah.
He always used to quote somebody whose name I have forgotten, who I think was an American sergeant, what we've ended up doing, rather than making the important measurable, we've made the measurable important. Which is, I think, a big part of that, and looking about how we shake those sort of ingrained beliefs. But you're absolutely right, it's about how people are intelligent, how they are creative, as opposed to whether or not they are.
Of course, thank you. One more, yeah, perfect.
Thanks, Tony McLaren from the Habs Elstree Schools. Kind of mentioned sort of policymakers, parents, students in the conversation, but I wondered, how do we get teachers to imagine it? How do we break ourselves out of the kind of stultifying effects of our own educational experiences, the system in which, staff who've worked for sort of 40 years plus in some cases? How do we achieve that imagination alongside the day-to-day delivery in the classroom? I think it's a real challenge.
Thank you, really good one. And just one more here, this lady in white. Perfect.
Thanks. My name's Hannah. I'm here from National Citizen Service Trust, so I don't actually work in the education sector, but we have been trying to do, we've been doing work together with the Duke of Edinburgh Award for a couple of years now, trying to look at the role of enrichment. NCS is obviously an enrichment programme, Duke of Edinburgh is an enrichment programme, and how important that is in the context of a kind of wider education. And it always strikes me, we've tried to bring quite a lot of education sector leaders into our work. I'm here today, but I don't really know that many people, and I just think when we're talking about the breadth of a child's achievement and sense of self, and enrichment activities have such an important part to play in that, but we still operate with quite different sectors in a way, and the youth sector's over here, education over there, and so just a bit of a plea today to sort of think about the common cause across sectors, and it feels like now is a really good time to be, and quite a lot of opportunity, I think, to do that more.
I love that. As you know, that's very dear to my heart, Hannah, and I wear my other hat with working for the Scouts as well. So I love to bring that kind of youth sector. And yeah, we're not going to respect any boundaries today. We're all in education in the broadest sense. But yeah, let's come back to those last issues to finish off, Kate. So advice for teachers, how to break out of kind of silos.
There are a few, and you're right, it's difficult, it's not easy, because, you know, there comes a point where you're so in the day-to-day slog of it that you can't see the wood for the trees, which is completely understandable. I think there are a few things. The first is to find a way to reconnect with your own creativity. And I say that having been on genuinely a bit of my own journey with that recently, of sort of walking the talk. It's very easy to get bogged down by the day-to-day, you know, grind and bureaucracy, and at the end of the day you've got nothing left but maybe a bit of Netflix and an early night, preferably. But actually making time to spark your own creativity is, I think, the best way that you can then bring that into your work. And remembering, and this was, again, one of my favourite things that Dad ever said, was that, because he'd given up completely speaking to policymakers after All Our Futures, was that if you are in any capacity involved in education, particularly if you're a teacher, but in any capacity, then what you do on a day-to-day basis is the education system as far as the kids in your classroom are concerned. They don't care what's happening in Finland or in, you know, America. They don't care what's happening in the classroom across the hall. They care about what happens from the minute they get to school in the morning to when they leave. And so if you change what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, even like you were saying, the very small changes, for those kids in your class, you are changing the education system for them. And that's, I think, the only way it will change is everybody making small changes and it turning into this very big quake. And the best way to do that is to find it in yourself, is to find a way to reconnect with what it is that makes you create. Stop touching my microphone, sorry. That makes you creatively vibrate, because that's contagious, that's infectious.
Absolutely, Kate. And then this, just to finish off this point about kind of informal education, education in the broader sense, the role of that.
Yeah, we confuse, don't we, education, schools and learning as interchangeable terms, and they all mean different things. There are some great initiatives. Jakob Hecht, who's one of the fathers of the democratic education movement, he has a program called Education Cities, where you go out into the school has an active partnership with things, you know, because you realise that it's important to the kids because it's their city, and it's important to the people in the city, the store owners and things, because, you know, our future is in their hands. And so there are some really shining examples of that. It doesn't have to be that complicated or elaborate. You just have to remember that you're not an island. You know, you're a part. You're raising kids. Dad will talk about how the purpose of education is to empower young people to learn about the world around them and the world within them. And it starts with the world. Well, it starts with the world within you, but, you know, a huge part of that is connecting with the world around you. So we love to see it.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Kate. That was absolutely brilliant. We'll include Pedgi's poem and the link to those two animated films that John and Kate have mentioned in the notes from this as well, so you can go and have a look at them as part of your, not homework, but your inspiration after this. Can I just have a huge round of applause for Kate? Thank you so much.